So we've learned how to use cascading style sheets to start to give a little bit of visual customization to our site. It still looks nothing like a website that we would look for online, right? And part of the reason is there's just not that much content yet. But another part of the reason is we don't really have great visual separation of our elements. So right now this is a heading is just floating on this blue background. This is a paragraph that's out of alignment and so forth. So next up we need to start looking at how to position these elements in a more custom fashion. And the first new tag that we'll need to learn to do that is the ID attribute, and we're going to pair that with the div tag. And initially it's not going to do anything, so you'll just have to trust me. We're going to do this. Instead of having a paragraph, for this is a paragraph, I might change this text just so it's not confusing. So like I ate a cheeseburger or something like that. So instead of paragraph, we're going to call this a div. This is a regular tag that opens and closes. But in addition to div, we're going to give it ID equals quotes, and then I might call this cheeseburger. Now, the reason that I'm calling it something like that, which is a fairly non-technical sounding name, is I don't want to accidentally use something that already has meaning in CSS or HTML, right? So name things in a way that'll be easy for you to remember, but just don't name them something vague like HTML or body or something, because those terms are already in use. Okay, if I save this and I head back over here and reload the page, you can see that the position changed slightly because it no longer has the formatting associated with a paragraph, but there's nothing that's really happened yet. So now I'll show you the power of this as multiplied by the CSS box model, or I should say that again, the CSS box model. Now, the box model is a way of positioning elements in space. So you can see here it starts with the content, and then right next to the content is some additional space called padding. Beyond that is a border, if we choose to put one in, and then the margin is sort of like the space between divs, for example. So the content is separated by from the edge of its div by padding, whereas the margin is the separation between subsequent divs. So for example, if I head back to Atom, you can see here I was playing around with a class earlier, which is denoted by a period, so ignore that for now. I'm changing this to a hash marker, a number sign, which is the name of an ID. Okay, so the ID cheese is going to be associated with certain characteristics in the box model. So one of the things we can say is padding, right? So the padding was the amount of space that happens just beyond the content. We also can mess around with a border, and you can see that Atom automatically prompts me for a lot of different characteristics that I can work with that are related to the border. So let's say that the border is 3 pixels solid and the color black. Now if we're working in hex and we know that all 6 of our numbers are going to be the same, I only need 3. So again, a number sign, in this case the number sign denotes hex as opposed to an ID, 000 for black. The background is going to be white, and then the width I'm going to get rid of here. That was something I was playing with before. Okay, so we've established padding, border, and background. Let's see what this looks like. I'm going to reload it. Okay, and still nothing yet, so let's see what I left out. So we have cheese, the ID. Background is there. Interesting. And then back to index. Here's the problem. So my div ID is supposed to be cheeseburger, not cheese. And part of the reason that I'm leaving this mistake in this video is that no matter how much practice you have with writing HTML and CSS, this kind of thing is going to happen to you all the time. So you need to get used to this kind of troubleshooting, right? So things need to be spelled exactly the same. So I'll change this to burger and save it, head back out to the page, reload it, and then we get something like that. So look, this is still a very ugly website, but we're starting to get a glimmer of the way that websites are usually put together, right? There's usually a little bit of space in between your content and the edge of the box that it's sitting in. That box usually needs to be a different color from the background to make it clear where it is. So let's start to tighten this up a little bit so it doesn't look quite so ugly. Okay, we'll head back to Atom. I'm just going to get rid of that border because I think it's unnecessary. And we can probably whittle this padding down to, say, 8 pixels or something like that. I might also put a width in here of maybe 150 pixels and a height of 150 pixels. And notice how I'm using the syntax that's appropriate to CSS as opposed to HTML, right? So first I talk about the characteristic I want to change, then put in a colon and a space, and then I need to lay out my units in a very specific way. In this case it's pixels, in this case it's a hex color, and then we always end with a semicolon. If you ever find that things aren't working, go back and look at your CSS page and see if you've missed a semicolon somewhere. That's a really common one. So I'll save this, head back out to my page, reload it, and you can see that this is starting to get a little bit closer. Now, one more trick I'll show you is lorem ipsum. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that this refers to a like a famous Latin monologue from thousands of years ago. I can't remember exactly, but it's often used as dummy text so that if we want to see what a website's going to look like, we can just put big blocks of text in there that look sort of naturalistic without having to write random words. So let's just say I grab one paragraph of lorem ipsum, and then I can copy it, head back to Atom, and over to my index page, and instead of I ate a cheeseburger, now I can paste in a whole bunch of text. Okay, so we want to make sure that our div is still there at the end. We know that HTML ignores, random white space and hard returns and so forth, so I'll save it, go back out to the index, and then I can see this. Now, this starts to look good in some ways because we're enforcing that 8 pixels to the top and to the bottom and to the right, but we have so much text that it overflows our little box. So I'll head back to Atom, over to our CSS page, and I'll just get rid of the height characteristic. And maybe I'll make our padding a little bigger, like 15 pixels. Now if I hit refresh, you can see now while we maintain that width, we no longer respect the height, and we just let the height grow to exactly how much the content needs, and then we add that extra piece of padding there on the bottom. So this is still far from a beautiful website, but at least this gives you an entree into the box model and shows you how we can start to articulate this information so that it's readable and attractive to the eye.